Good afternoon, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. Each week, I take a couple of minutes and I talk about our weekly newsletter. I share insights into why I included the articles that I did and what was my thinking around the op-ed that I included. So today, I'm going to be talking about the March 18th, 2026 newsletter. Let's jump right into it. The complete link to the newsletter is available in the description box down below. You can read the newsletter each and every week that it comes out on the platform Ghost. We do also link to it across social media, so Facebook, Instagram stories, what have you. And then you can jump on to the live tab of our YouTube channel a few days later and listen to this audio version for those of you who don't have any time to have another email in your inbox. So the topic this week is entitled The Camp Mystic Impact on Aquatics. And I was a little bit uncertain if I was going to really address this, if it was going to be a topic that was valuable to most of our subscribers. But usually when I have like a little niggling, it is something that should be discussed. It's something I've been thinking about. So I went ahead this week and I circled back to the tragic incident of the Camp Mystic flooding that occurred last July 2025 in Texas. So for a little bit of background, if you don't recall, last summer there was flash flooding in Texas. The Rio Grande River had risen quite a number of feet and created flood conditions. The most dramatic that we heard about in the general media was a overnight girls' camp called Camp Mystic. And there was a tragedy last summer whereby 28 people lost their lives in the span of a single night, where, as best as we understand from reconstruction of the events of that evening, in the middle of the night, 1, 2, 3 a.m., the water level rose and it flooded a cabin where younger girls were sleeping with their counselors, the Bubble Inn. And so 25 campers, 2 counselors in their late teens, early 20s, as well as one of the camp directors, the male husband, they all died. They were unable to evade the raging waters. And that has been a major point of conversation for the last 9 months. I would describe myself as a former summer camp camper, camp counselor. You're kind of a camper for life if it's something that's meaningful to you. I attended a sleepaway summer camp in Ontario, and that definitely formed who I am as a person in addition to working in aquatics. So I do have a little bit of bias in terms of my interest in this story. I talked about it with a close friend who's another camper, and this type of incident is a real tragedy, the stuff of nightmares. It's absolutely horrible for everyone involved that this happened. But as I said in the newsletter, 2 things can be true at once. And although correlation is not causation, I'm starting to see out in the aquatic industry at large, recreation at large, general supervised activities, youth activities at large, this trickle-down effect that I perceive is coming from investigation regarding the conditions at Camp Mystic. What's really challenging is we don't have all of the details yet. There are still a number of state investigations that are not concluded. We don't have all of that public information available yet, or rather, I should say that information has not been made publicly available yet. Then there is the complicating factor that the families, in their right to do so, have gone ahead and sued both the summer camp ownership as well as what someone described as DISHES, a regulatory agency in Texas that grants accreditation for summer camps. So there's a lot of very upset families who are seeking answers to a incident that had tragic consequences, that has been hard to piece together because this happened in the middle of the night, suddenly, as best as we understand. and a lot of the evidence may have been wiped away, flooded away. There's still a little girl who's missing. Her body's never been recovered, seal. So it is just a horrible, horrible situation. However, I have been trying to read as much as I can about this incident, this facility, these reports, and there is a lot of veritably concerning information coming to light in terms of, and I can't substantiate this, I'm not there, I haven't seen any of this, but this is what I've read, that allegedly the summer camp did not have certain emergency response protocols in place, both for training staff how to evacuate to higher ground, both in terms of monitoring the water level, both in terms of weather advisories, as well as communication devices. A lot of these rural properties, you may not have strong cell phone signal, you may not have a landline, you may not have reliable internet. But one of the most telling things, in my personal opinion, that I did read about was that there had been mass flooding in this area in the 1980s, including when the female camp director was pregnant and she had to be evacuated by helicopter because the roads were impassable, as well as other summer camp related drowning fatalities in the region, not specifically at Camp Mystic, but in the geographic region. And so I guess where I was going with this in this week's newsletter, what is the tie-in of what we're seeing from Camp Mystic to aquatics, to recreation, to supervised activities and things like that? The families of the campers and camp counselors, they have formed a nonprofit called Heavens 27, and they are actively working as well to improve summer camp legislative standards across the United States. So passing laws, I believe already one has been passed in the state of Texas, and they are onwards working in Alabama and Missouri to change many different requirements about these organizations, whether for-profit, not-for-profit, who are caring for children. And to tie it back to aquatics, like, why did I put all of this information in an aquatic newsletter? Why did I include a bunch of background articles? I think this is an interesting moment where there is a legacy organization that perhaps, and this isn't substantiated, but perhaps was allowed to operate without the most up-to-date documentation or the most stringent permit requirements. That's the allegation that Dishes, the regulatory agency in Texas, allowed the camp to operate with a permit despite not meeting certain standards. And I can absolutely believe that that happened, because jumping to aquatics for a second, I've worked with a number of clients, including one client, one facility I fired that was very high profile and felt that they could do no wrong, that they were in some way special, that they were in some way not required to follow the same regulatory requirements as the rest of the province for operating a swimming pool. So I can absolutely imagine a summer camp or any business that's been around for nearly 100 years that has gotten comfortable in their boots, so to speak, with their public profile, their community profile, their very rabid alumni audience, network of former campers and counselors, and them believing that they are Teflon coated, so to speak, and don't need to have very basic things that other camps are required to have. I'm not suggesting that's valid. I'm not suggesting that is in fact the case here. I don't have any more information than anybody else reading about this from afar. But the genesis of this article, in terms of why I connected it back to the aquatic industry, why I shared the Camp Mystic situation, is, in my opinion, it's evolved from an unavoidable tragedy, which is what I think a lot of us thought when this first happened in July 2025, to a completely preventable tragedy. And so that is what I think, in my personal opinion, inspires the fury of the parents who I've been following on Instagram for their camp, their nonprofit that is working to improve camp standards. So their campaign for camp safety. They post a lot on Instagram stories in terms of family testimonials, individual testimonials about their daughters whom they've lost. As more details have come out, such as the camp seeking to renew their permit in 2026 to continue to operate, to take registrations for summer camp in 2026, to solicit registrations, to continue as normal, so to speak, by not disclosing on their website the deaths that occurred at their site, by not disclosing ongoing issues, investigations, etc. I think that there is reasonable concern on the part of lots of people that this lesson hasn't necessarily been learned or taken seriously, at least insofar as what I've seen or read. There hasn't been a serious, I was going to say crise, which is French, but crisis of conscience. So I think we see the same thing in aquatics, where there are some legacy organizations, some pools, some different facilities where there's not a sense that anything's ever going to happen. And then there's also lots of situations where there's water out and around us, whether it is an outdoor summer camp, a daycare outing, a school trip outing, a Girl Guide outing, where it's not possible to anticipate everything. We can't have lifeguards all the time. We can't bubble wrap kids, but there is some thought that needs to go into, like, my camp was on a lake. The lake didn't flood the way being on the Rio Grande River floods. I mean, I lived in New Mexico only for 1 year, which is not too far from El Paso, Texas, where the Rio Grande is located. And even just in that 1 year that I lived in that region, you would learn about the huge desert rainfalls, the arroyos for spillover water, the flooding of the Rio Grande River, the speed of the Rio Grande River. Like, it's just perplexing to me that you would have a summer camp next to a river with flooding that happened in the 80s and not have done anything to prepare for that in 2025. So this has been maybe more of a personal topic than professional, so to speak. But I think one of the things that draws people to following Lakeview Aquatic Consultants on social media, to listening to me chat each week in these live YouTube videos, reading our newsletter, following on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you choose to follow us. And thank you, because there's over 5,000 of you across platforms, and I don't take that for granted. But one of the things that I am known for is being professionally curious and reading widely. And I'm really starting to think, in my personal opinion, that there's a trickle-down effect that's coming for camps, for aquatics, as there should be. Because there's a contract that we create when we take people's money, whether that's for summer camp registration fees, swim lesson fees, a gym membership, Boy Scouts fees. And we create these systems to supervise the children that are put in our care. And yes, there's some areas that we focus on. So making sure that vulnerable children are not placed with people who have, criminal history or other concerns. But there is more to it in terms of making sure everybody goes home safe and alive. And this has been something that I think is going to continue to be in the news, especially as we head into summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're late March now. Summer's just around the corner. School letting out, kids going to camp or outdoor activities is just around the corner. And I think there's some very real questions that can be had or discussed with different organizations and different activities that are happening, and how we keep kids safe in those environments where water is close by. The second half of the newsletter, as you know, we go through other articles that I've been reading throughout the week. This week, I didn't provide a lot of commentary on the articles that I included. The most urgent one that just came out yesterday, Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, as well as today, Wednesday, March 18th, when I'm recording this video, is an allegation of an entrapment in Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area, over the last couple of days, We don't have a lot of details yet, but as many of you know, I am professionally very interested in the topic of entrapment. It's covered heavily in my certified pool operator classes, and I've also done a number of videos over the years with Abby's Hope, for example, a foundation that remembers Abigail Taylor, who died from an entrapment incident in a wading pool in a country club in Minneapolis, as well as the death of Elia Lynette Jaco back in 2024 at the Hilton Brook Hollow in Texas. So I will link to those videos as well in the description down below, and I will keep following this particular story if we get more information about what happened in Pittsburgh. A few other articles that I shared this week included a little boy who's working to create safety protocols around storm drains, where his little brother was killed being sucked into a storm drain, like a city municipal storm drain after a big rainfall. Shared a couple of different issues that are proceeding in terms of measures in the United States to restrict drone activity over amusement parks. This is something we mentioned about 4 or 5 months ago that IAPA is supporting. Also shared some articles pertaining to some ongoing cases in terms of the settlement a few months ago where the 2 brothers drowned fatally in their school activity. And that was the one where I shared the footage where allegedly the lifeguard was off deck in the hallway on the CCTV camera. And there's now charges that the lifeguard, I don't know if it's the same one or a different lifeguard, lied during the probe of that incident investigation. The state of Florida has decided to move ahead with expanding access to swim vouchers for children ages 1 to 7. There were some pretty limited parameters to that program when it first came out, and now there has been a movement to expand who can access those vouchers. I shared an article pertaining to a discussion of a water park that's being disputed by some residents or some neighbors in that particular area. What struck me about that particular article was the ongoing conversation I've been having in my professional work regarding what is a water park and what is not a water park. This is a conversation that's come up several times in several different situations. For example, the World Water Park Association conference and trade show, people have asked me, why do you go to this show? You don't operate a water park. When respectfully, I would counter that a lot of our municipal clients here in Alberta, if you have 3 or 4 water slides and 5 or 6 basins, you respectfully are close to the complexity of a water park, even if your facility does not identify as a water park, or even if you're not a for-profit water park. Some of the size and scale of facilities that we're seeing in Canada really do mimic a water park. And so I think we sometimes need to not get caught up in thinking, oh, we're not Disney, oh, we're not Universal, oh, we're not Aquatica, or, what have you. You can be a water park just by dint of square footage and amenities and bather load. Shared a couple of different other articles pertaining to stories that have been ongoing for several weeks, right? There was the water park hotel in Omaha where the guy drank the water a couple weeks ago. They are appealing their closure. I shared a couple of other court cases, people appealing the demolition of a facility that may not have been communicated publicly with the right state disclosure requirements. Also shared an article pertaining to a lifeguard who drowned in the Philippines trying to rescue someone, a woman in Ontario, Windsor mom who got time in prison for the backyard drowning of her child. So all of the articles this week are just kind of all over the place. The drama out of Saskatoon, where the Lakewood Civic Center, their slide is now permanently closed for safety reasons, as death. In Kentucky. So kind of a hodgepodge set of topics this week. In the final part of the newsletter, I did introduce a new advice column. I'm not sure why it took me so long to do this, but over the years, I've always gotten lots of emails and direct messages and texts from former CPO students, as well as colleagues and clients asking questions. And often they're prefaced with, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, to which I would say there are no stupid questions. The point is to get you the resources that you need to be able to do the things that you need to do. But I finally realized that I should just create an anonymous advice column. And so click on the link that I provide, and it takes you to an anonymous Google form that can be filled out as many times as you want. And that is going to be the basis for which I'm going to start tackling some topics in future newsletters, whether it's one question a week or a bunch of questions a couple times a year. I'm also going to be posting this to our social media accounts. So this will remain a standing database for collecting comments and questions that people have that I can address in a way that is practical. The bottom part of the newsletter has a link to my vlog regarding Stargard Elite Camp earlier this year. Back in February, I did go to their conference. So it is my roughly 40-minute rundown of that conference. And then the tail end of the newsletter does include some background reading on Camp Mystic. So if you haven't kind of tracked what's been happening there, I did share some different articles, gift articles from the New York Times, as well as some behind paywalls that you might have to log in or join to access. I tried to minimize those as much as possible, but I also try and provide good quality articles, especially from local reporting in Texas. They are some of the best people to comment on issues directly in Texas. But kind of a shorter newsletter this week, a topic that maybe you don't feel is relevant to what you do every day, but is definitely a topic that I thought needed to be discussed. Next week, I do have a more traditional topic planned regarding risk assessment and facility operations. So if this week's newsletter wasn't your cup of tea, join me again next week, March 25th, when we'll be back with more of a traditional topic. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Every single subscriber makes a huge difference. I'm not here to get 100,000 subscribers. I'm not here to get monetized, but it does really help when I get feedback to know what you do want to see, what you don't want to see, and watch time is always extremely valuable. So thank you so much for being here. I will catch you same time next week in the audio version of the newsletter. Bye for now.